welcome to the Director's ID and the whole, and just basically this very interesting and quite concerning legislation. I think that's got everyone kind of working out what on earth is going on. Hopefully after today, you'll have a lot more clarity on it. So without further ado, let's get underway with the Director's ID webinar. So as usual, what we're teaching, we're not basically licensed lawyers or financial planners or accountants, and we certainly choose not to be. Even though I am actually a qualified lawyer, I'm a qualified accountant, and I'm a qualified financial planner. And I've got honours, and I've worked for the ATO for 10 years. I used to be a tax auditor, specialised in foundations, and been involved in numerous legal rights activism stuff over the years. So do have a bit of background and history on this. Activism has always been high on my radar. And so hence this stuff is very dear to my heart. So again, though, just education, empowerment, information, which you can go away with. I've been able to successfully navigate most of this stuff pretty much in my life just by understanding the empowerment and the legal rights that we have. And this is my observation with most people, is that it's through ignorance and not understanding your legal rights and understanding your actual state of empowerment and how the system works that causes people to what I call perish or fall under the wheels of the train which is coming. So generally disempowerment and not knowing your rights is how people and how we all get into trouble in society. It's how we were successfully coerced into all kinds of ridiculous stuff over the last few years, just because people didn't really know their rights, didn't see it coming, and weren't really ready for it. So hopefully by what you'll hear today, you'll be a bit more ready for what this all means and where this could lead to, and be a little bit more prepared for what lies ahead. So a bit of housekeeping. Look, I'm not quite sure how long it will go for. I'm anticipating somewhere between 45 to 60 minutes with questions. So it should be finished by 10 o'clock Perth time, at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. If you have questions, if you can, put them in the Q&A box rather than in the chat, because they get lost in the chat. Because we literally, when there's a lot of people on the webinar, we tend to get lots of chat, and I choose not to shut the chat off. So if you do put it in the chat, look, if I do see it and it lines with the webinar, I'll answer it, or certainly at the end we'll be doing a question and answer. But if possible, just see if you can see the Q&A box, and that's where you put the question. It just makes it easier to make sure that we can tick them off. So without further ado, let's get underway. So who's a little bit, before we get started, who's a little bit kind of worried about this whole thing? Like kind of going like, shit, this whole thing does not look particularly good. More than a little bit look, I feel you all. That's why I'm doing this. And yes, I think after what happened with COVID and everything like that, I think people are suddenly realizing that it's certainly, as I told someone, the simplest way to define what happened with the whole medical situation in the last few years is, I said, when someone asked me for my views and one of my friends, I said to them, well, my first question to you is, do you think that the government genuinely cares about my health? And I said, if you believe that, then you probably still believe in Santa Claus. And that was the end of the discussion. So I said, whatever's going on with this whole thing, I highly doubt it's to do with my health. I'm sure there's something else. And I think the same with the Director's ID. I highly doubt it's to look after people and stuff like that, and just to centralize and control and things like that. In saying that, it is what it is, and it's best if we actually, go into this stuff as well. So, and there's so many things out there, and this is why people get into trouble when we start operating what I call reactively. And so today I'm going to be more teaching a proactive approach where you come from a state of balance, a place of being centered, and a place of having some knowledge rather than just reading stuff on the internet or on Facebook. So I'll be sharing a little bit about how governments are intruding in our lives, number one. I'll be sharing about a very important topic called the Order of Creation and the Uniform Commercial Code, and how this exactly works, how the new Director's ID laws actually work. I'll be actually looking at the legislation and what's actually written in there, so that can really help you to get a good idea of it. I'll be sharing about the penalties for not complying, which, yes, they're pretty drastic, but at the same time, like anything, as you will see, there are there are ways to deal with it as well. It's not like there's nothing that you can do about it. There's certainly things that you can actually do. So, and then from there, we'll obviously be talking about solutions and ways to deal with things and how you can move ahead and get stuff done. And then we'll be just going from there. So the nature of the Director's ID is, and then at the end, of course, we'll be giving you opportunity for questions. I'll be giving you some clear strategies by which you can deal with it. So really, you're going to walk away from this webinar in a position where you know your rights, you know your choice, and you can decide what you're going to do. Because really, this webinar is about empowering you. That's the main point. Not me telling you what you should do, me telling you what I'm personally doing, and letting you be empowered enough to make your own choice. Because that's what the Global Wealth Club is about, empowering people to take back their power. And that's what's going to ultimately sort this kind of stuff out in our country. And at the end of the webinar, we'll be doing some questions and answers. And then after that, what we'll be doing is, although we won't be selling anything, I'll be very clear on that one. I'm not going to be offering anything for sale at the end of this webinar. It's free content. At the end, all we'll do is, for those of you who would like to learn more about our community and what I call our vision at the club, which is that to be like what I call Google and Facebook and give 99% of our content away for free, where we're giving the best free, financial, legal education in the world. That's my eventual aim. So that then people will be encouraged to let their friends know, and we can empower as many people as we can and hopefully sort out this mess in our country. And then for the 1% who do want to actually work further with us, there's basically on our website, there's forms you can complete to ask to, apply for a free chat with one of our team to see how we can assist you. It's a bit like Google. People want to do AdWords, they sign up with Google, but 99% of our content will be for free. So, yeah, and Sandra says you're very generous with your info and time, and thank you. And Margaret says thank you. Yeah, look, look. The reality is that the only way we're going to be able to help people is by major philanthropic giving back. And I told someone that the reason that they managed to get away with doing what they're doing is, you think of all the free pharmaceutical benefits and the free this and the free that they give people, lure them into the system, and then they hit them from there. So the answer is giving a lot of really good free education and content that can really help the world and help people get empowered. So there's no reason why people won't get out there and empower themselves. Because imagine if Australia and America, or Australia is where I live, so I'm mainly concerned with my own country, but imagine if Australia, like a large number of Australians, got really empowered in their own understanding and knowledge and were able to push back. I mean, governments would have no choice eventually but to start running things properly. And that's the big vision why I do what I'm doing. Because I really, like I said, I don't like what's going on. I'm royally pissed off about the whole thing, to be really frank with you. I'm really annoyed about it. And I mean, running around yelling and screaming and doing Facebook memes is all fun, and I do all that kind of shit. But I'd rather just take some action, give the best education going, give lots and lots of it around, encourage people to share it around, assure you that we won't be spamming you with sales offers, because we really have better things to do with our time. Because we find anyway that when we're giving out, we always get clients coming through, completing forms, and eventually have people to work with to make sure we can keep going. So yeah, look, thank you everyone. I'm glad, because like I said, it benefits me if our country gets empowered, because I can live in a country where people have got some rights and freedom again, where I really don't like living in a country where you don't know what's going to happen next, what they're going to do on your health, whether they're going to stop you traveling. Shit like that's annoying. I just want to enjoy life, have fun, and see my friends and my people around me enjoy life as well. And, the truth is, I remember a very wealthy friend of mine once told me, he said, the problem is, he said, when you're very wealthy, often life gets lonely and you want your friends to enjoy it with you. And that's why I teach people to be wealthy. And I remember thinking that's a good way of putting it. So by empowering Australians and by us getting a better way of life, we all benefit, because then I've got more people to have fun with, and I can live in a more joyful society. Whereas if I don't, I can be looked after myself. But meanwhile, I sit there, seeing what's going on around me. So it's good, everyone. I just wasn't planning to start off like that, but that's how I feel. And I do believe that if we can, the journey to win our country back starts with a single step. It starts by bit empowering and learning stuff and things like this, and getting on with this. So, thanks everyone. So, yeah, look, Exactly about Felicia says about showing loyalty. Yeah, look, the best loyalty you can do is let people know about it, get the word out there, and make sure people go to our YouTube channel and go to this, because we are going to give really good free education, and I'm working to make it even better. As we speak, we're working on creating the best free financial education kind of content in the world that I can do. That's going to break it, make it really simple, give it away for free, so that no one's got excuses for not learning how to get their finances in order to get through to coming financial collapse. So it's great, everyone. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for your enthusiasm. It's really making me enjoy doing this more than ever. So on that note, let's get started. So let's talk about government intrusion in our lives and what it looks like. And it was very difficult for me to prepare for this webinar because honestly, I could have put about 5 hours of content in this. So I've really done my best to break this down and make this simple. So the big problem that we're facing is the bleeding obvious that governments are slowly, insidiously, like a frog boiling in water, intruding on our lives. And the problem is each step is so small and gradual. It's like, what's the big issue here? You know, what's the big issue really here? But it's very, very clever and extremely clever what's happening right now. And that's what's bothered me, is it's been so clever and so well done. It's like, how do you combat a secret, insidious enemy but has got all bases covered? And that's what I've been asking myself. You know, we see this kind of idea of Big Brother. George Orwell, 1984, predicted a kind of totalitarian dictatorship society. We've seen our country's rights and freedoms lost. And I'll say that again. I was speaking to One Nation candidate friend of mine and some others. And yeah, look, we just said, look, the reality is before we were fighting to protect our freedoms, now we've lost our freedoms and we've got to work out how we get them the fuck back. So it's a whole different ball game. And so, you know, it's good that people are waking up to this right now, you know, about the reality of what we're actually in right now. So facial recognition, we're seeing all this kind of stuff happen more and more. You've got this drones, and I think that the way things are going, without pushing back, you're going to see more and more of this stuff start happening. Bigger and bigger increased digital surveillance starting to take place, which, as we saw, that if someone controls the whole system that everyone relies on and has got bad intentions, then everyone who relies on it has got a problem. Government's just watching everything you do more and more. I mean, the level of surveillance software and what they can do is insane. Like, it's just like, wow, you know. What governments are actually up to in terms of doing that. And I mean, I'm preaching to the converted here, so I don't really need to spend too much time on this. It's just reminding us of why I think deep down we're really concerned with the director's ID, because I'd say everyone here is pretty aware, can see the issue, the insidious move towards this digital ID where everything is tracked by a single electronic centralized system where people really can't do an awful lot without it. And even now, with mandates supposedly ending, you know, like people still wanting to go to certain countries and still hitting challenges, you know, with vaccines and with various this. And now, of course, the World Health Organization are talking about a digital passport. So starting from May next year for health. And of course, eventually, and I'm sure all of you have heard this stuff, and John McAfee was talking about all this kind of stuff about your next purchase, you know, being with the wave of the hand. There's already places where they're doing this right now in the world. It's even was written in the Holy Bible, which many of you probably seen, which talked about this eventual society. Jim Rickards, one of the world's top economists, who's a non-religious person, in 2020 pretty much said about the importance of empowerment, because he said the way this is heading, this particular scripture here in the Bible is going to come into pass, and you can't do an awful lot unless you have this system, this implant or whatever. So it's really good to be aware about the whole thing and know what it's involved and understand what you're dealing with. And we're definitely in a war. There's no question of that. And in a time of war, it's a mental war, it's a consciousness war, it's a spiritual war, it's an economic war, whatever label you want to give it. We're definitely in a form of war right now, where you've got definite groups who insidiously try to take away freedom, take away assets, take away rights. And that's what communists actually, you know, do to you and things like that. So this is one of my favorite books. I don't know if anyone's got this here. It's a really good one. And this has been my mantra the whole way through COVID. Plan for what is difficult to do while it is easy, Do while it is great, while it is still small. I love this one because the best time to plan for really bad crap is when it's relatively easy and people aren't really putting much attention on it. The best time, for example, to apply for a mask exemption or vaccine exemption, which of course was early last year, because back then no one was really believing that masks would take off and become the new hobby, and the whole vaccine being coerced, I think people deep down still didn't believe it could really get as bad as it did. I remember this mantra was why I was getting mask exemptions and sorting out my vaccine stuff a long time before anyone else was doing it. And so no doubt that Nadine says, I remember you always saying this, and month by month, things got more and more painful. Correct. And so keep in mind that right now, there is things that you can do to reclaim your power and structure yourself to reclaim your finances and make sure that whatever's planned ahead for digital takeover, economic collapse, changing of the system for a new digital economic system or whatever else is planned in the next 3 to 5 years, the time to be planning for this is now, because right now we're still by and large entrenched in the old system. There's still ways you can move through it. So this is the best time to be getting things in place and having your strategy in plan right now. So the best way is to subdue the enemy without fighting, take your power, find ways to knock out the ways you're going to get you. I can remember I was already, just so you all know, on this stuff about digital IDs and digital stuff, I was already actioning this years ago, because I remember this mantra made me think, yeah, they're going to eventually try and use every license I've got against me, every tile of the system. I've got to minimize them, and the ones I've got to make sure I've got backup plans which I can move on fast. I was that convinced things would turn to shit many, many years ago. So I was already removing a lot of my licenses. I was pulling away from being a lawyer. I was pulling away from being an accountant. I was cutting down every single license because I thought at some stage, somebody, as things get worse, will start telling me what to do and they can fuck off as far as I'm concerned. Excuse the French. I'm in charge of my own life. I'm in charge of my own body, and I'm in charge of my own future. And yes, I'll work within a society. I'll work within a structure, but because I do understand the need for law and order, I do believe in that. But at the same time, what we're dealing with now is just absolute bullshit. So yeah, Margarita, I went to one of your presentations about a private structure years ago. Yeah, look, we all have done stuff, but the good thing is you can do things now, Fact is, we're all here today, and we can all, fact is 176 people on here right now, and I'm really impressed by that, and it's great to see Australians valuing their rights about all this. So yeah, keep it real. Yeah, I think I remember I was told, you always told you should never swear on webinars, and I think I do that just about all the time. So so Travis said you are sexy, Warren. Well, thanks, Travis. He's my Travis is my media guy, and yes, we love each other, don't we, Travis? So it's more important to outthink your enemy than to outfight. In other words, this is all about thinking strategically, calming down, relaxing, and things like that. So, yeah, people have sort of mentioned about the replay. Yeah, look, we will be recording this and, of course, putting it on our YouTube channel, which we like to do, so you can get the word out and tell your friends about it, make sure they can watch it. There's a big difference between lawful and legal. And this is one of the things I learned. So this is a really good thing to understand, which can free you from any outrageous requirements. Generally, the best way to understand the difference, and this was written by a guy called Bastiat, and Bastiat wrote a magnificent book called The Law, which is a free book online where he talks about understanding lawful and legal. And an extreme example he gave about lawful and legal is like in China, like let's say you have a law come in which says you can only have one child, and if you've got more than that, you've got to give them to the government and they'll get rid of them so we can keep society low. He said that may well be legal, but it's not lawful. The other example he gave, a government might charge 80% tax. That may be legal, but it's unlawful because lawful is common law. It's basically what makes common sense. And that was the best way I heard common law described to me. It's common sense. So like common sense is like, I wouldn't steal from you because you're my fellow citizen. I wouldn't lock you up in the room, like that's taking your liberty. I wouldn't steal your property from you. I wouldn't basically, so life, liberty, property, I wouldn't kill you. unless I was defending myself or unless there was a really good reason to do so. So that's common law. Common law makes sense. Things like, oh, you've got to have this, you've got to have a marriage license, you've got to do a census, you've got to vote, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. That's actually contract law. That's what's called voluntarily commercial law, what you can contract into or not. So common law is the law that's common to God and to man. That's the basic rule of common law, and it's common sense. So passing some kind of law that says you can't walk in the bush, like Daniel Andrews was talking about doing, I mean, that's obviously legal maybe, but definitely not lawful. I mean, for goodness sake, telling people they can't walk in the bush, that's just absolute crap, you know? Things like that. So it's important to understand what kind of law are you dealing with. That's the question you've always got to ask. Is it a law? Is it a legal law, or is it a lawful law? So, for example, if the government passed a law, certain laws, I have no problem. Personally, for example, I have no trouble with RBTs because to me, protecting my fellow citizens on the roads from drunk drivers who could cause serious harm, it makes sense to me to do RBTs. I like RBTs. I always happily do that. It's just my personal thing. Whereas getting a camera clock me at 8 Ks over the limit is just straight out legal revenue raising bullshit. So that's just a good example of how it works. So there's an order of creation where God's law is higher than government's law or contract law, because contract law by its very nature is voluntary. If you sign up with the Global Wealth Club, it's a voluntary law. So if you sign a contract with us where you agree to pay us, say, $10,000 hypothetically, and we'll do this, this, and this for you, and then you try and pull out of it, when you sign the contract, we've done our part, we can enforce that law because you've consented and we delivered our obligations under the contract. Well, government's basically saying you must do this, this, and this, where there's no contract, it's just a form of coercion, really. It's not really legitimate kind of contract law or whatever else and stuff like that. So things like that. So that's very, very important. So basically, the order of creation, and this is what I was taught when I was in my underground off-the-grid movement, when I was working with some of the world's best secret agents and stuff like that. I was amazingly fortunate to meet these people. One guy who'd been the top guy in New Zealand, working directly with the Premier of New Zealand, or whatever you call him over there, the Prime Minister. So he basically showed me this whole thing and how the system is by and large based on the Holy Bible. This is something that the Catholics know because they were involved in it, of course. The Freemasons and various other groups who are behind the whole thing know that. So God, or, you know, whatever, however we understand God, if you were Indian, Hindu would be the way we'd understand. If you're Australia, Christian is in our constitution, or in the US, Thailand, more Buddhist. Ultimately, all of them ways of expressing, you know, the one creator or whatever else that that basically creates everything and uses various archetypes and references to understand. So God creates man and woman, which we are the sovereign beings, accountable to a higher law, common law, to do good by our fellow man and by the laws of nature, which creates governments, which, in other words, bodies or groups to help regulate our societies and bring a better, stable, more orderly society, because I don't want bikies and people going around beating people up and shooting them. So that's where governments serve a good purpose. A good government is designed to be relatively small, relatively stable, and it deals with crime and helps centralize infrastructure to improve things for the common good. That's what they're meant to do. They're meant to administer common law to work for the common good of their society that they're in charge in. Something which I might add Indigenous tribes understand very well and do better than we do. And then the government, though, in what we're living in today, creates persons. In other words, creates these fictitious slave-type entities that then do what they're told under a form of contract law. So if you ever want to understand a bit more about that, I'll be teaching more about that. There's a guy called Howard Freeman who wrote an amazing book called The UCC Connection, which, UCC, and the UCC Connection goes into the fact that if it's not basically common law, it's what's called contract or civil law, which means you've always got a choice. So one thing I was challenged early on in my sovereignty journey was like, what's the name of the government officials, public servants? Okay, so who's their master? And I remember going, oh, that's awesome. So in other words, it says whenever you go and see a public servant, basically, like, so to speak, just realize they're your servant. So Daniel Andrews is your servant, for example, if you live in Victoria. And it's a good thing to basically realize. So Daniel Andrew is your servant. And I'm sure many of you would love that. Howard Freeman, that's the name of the guy here, just to quickly show you. But yeah, the UCC connection, a really interesting little book which explains it really nicely. He's very simple. Public servants, who is the master? So when I go in and whenever I'm dealing with a government official, I always remind myself, I am the master. You know, this is my servant and they're here to help me in what I'm doing. And it works really well when you think like that. So public servants are enslaved to their masters, you know, and this mental state of empowerment helps you deal with any government official without fear, once you know that. Thomas Jefferson, one of my favorite freedom reformer dudes, there is no justification for taking away individuals' freedoms in the guise of public safety. So yeah, I'm sure that would be great if the politicians had read him and listened to him in the middle of that. So things like that. So when the governments are afraid of the government, that's tyranny. When the government is afraid of the people, that's liberty. So that's when the people are afraid of the government, it's tyranny. But when the government is afraid of people, that's liberty. Great one. Bastiat, the guy I mentioned about who wrote that book, which you can get online for free. It's a big reading, but it's worth reading it. Life, liberty, and property don't exist because men have made laws. On the contrary, it was the fact that life, liberty, and property existed that caused laws to be made in the first place. So the correct law is actually designed to improve life, liberty, and property, like e.g. criminal law that stops people robbing you, beating you up, killing you, raping you, whatever else. That's good because that is protecting life, liberty, property. Laws that basically say you can't walk in bushes, that you've got a lockdown because a virus might hit you, you're starting to now like actually take away life, liberty, and property. So Bastiat puts it really well when he says that when people are wanting to steal money from you and rob you and basically shit all over you, what they do is they turn it into a justifiably sounding, well-worded legal system of lots of really weird, wonderful words that sound all really good. So it sounds like a moral code to basically justify stealing your stuff, locking you up, taking your money, and eventually impoverishing you, making you their bitch. So that's basically, in layman's terms, what Bastiat's saying. So it's really what governments are doing to try and pretty much make everyone fall under this communist kind of system, and they give really good laws and rules to justify it. So understanding contract versus civil laws I've mentioned, it's a really good thing as you start to get that. It's a very liberating thing because in the 10 maxims of commercial law, for example, which is the foundation of all law, which Blackstone's legal commentaries and various others talk about. And I'm talking as a guy who used to be a lawyer, was a damn good one, I might add too, and I was good at, and also studied the underground original foundations of law. So law cannot compel performance, like it has to be voluntarily consented to. That's the first rule. So a law has to basically be consented to by living in the society, by agreeing to be part of the system and things like that. The really critical one I want everyone to really grasp is every law has a remedy. So that means there always is a way around every law. There has to be. Otherwise, it's not really a law. It's a dictatorial executive Joe Biden type of order. It's meant to have a remedy. And he or she who leaves the field of battle first consents by default. So doing nothing at all about something is in itself acceptance. So that's why it's very important that you can't just sit there and just let things happen. You have to actually do something about it, like reply in writing. And that's why some of you who are my clients would know, I've always said to people like about replying in writing. So the pen is mightier than the sword. That's why the greatest skill you can ever learn is understanding the power of the pen and understanding legal notices and how to respond back. And it's one of my favorite things is to hit idiots with legal notices. And even give governments ones at times. They have no idea what to do with these things, you know, and you really write them in a way where you know what you're doing. And I remember one of the things when I was involved in sovereignty movements, it was really great to see how we would push back against various groups and things like that and see what would happen. One of the things you can do, and I'll just do this as an aside, if you want to know more about legal notices, if you go into our Global Wealth Club education and go to our free trainings, we're just finalising and getting them refined. But in about a few days from now, it's going to be broken up into 3 sections. There's going to be the beginning of your journey to sovereignty, and then the next one will be about creating income, and then the third one will be about protecting your wealth. But the knowing your common law rights, which is all 3, as well as a section on legal notices. So this teaches you some tricks about how to write notices when dealing with governments, debt collectors, and all kinds of people like that. Who thinks that would be useful to have that? And like I said, I've given some really good stuff in there. So yeah, good to get your power. So yeah, look, it's great. I really enjoy when I give stuff to people like that, because I find that people always want to give back anyway. And it does go back to I grew up in a missionary kind of family, so we're always taught about that. So yeah, the pen is might even sword. So you really have to understand the power of what you write and what you say. And you know that. I mean, most people are more scared of getting the next mandates from the governments hitting you, which were written out in scary language, than they were pretty much about seeing anything else. It was the mandates that really is what scares people today. So how does the director ID work now that I set the foundation to all of this? So I'm just going to be a bit more technical now and go through what provisions actually say. So director ID is a unique 15 identity, which is basically given to a director. It's in the new Part 9.1A of the Corporations Act. So going back to things, what kind of law? Is this common law or civil law? The answer is civil contract law. So it's contractual law. So it's the first thing to realise this, that if you want to set up a corporation in Australia, it's contractual law. So it's basically, I've pretty much quoted what the government said it is to do, to trace their involvement in the operations of the company to administer their system. Who must apply for it? All directors and alternate directors of Australian company, registered body corporates, registered foreign company, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders must have a director's ID. So, and in fact, since about April now, you must basically get the DIN before you can actually be appointed. So offshore companies have to apply as well, is what they say if they want to do business in Australia by applying to be a registered, foreign corporation. There are approximately 2.7 million companies registered in Australia at the moment. And the new registrar anticipates that there's going to be approximately 10% of the population will be required to have a director's ID. So it's really taking a deeper control of the commercial system and how it operates. And what, of course, they said is that they must apply by 30th of November 2022, which is why everyone's going, oh, shit, I better find out what the fuck I should do. So in terms of can you accountant, because that's one question people ask, the answer is no. You've got to do it yourself if you decide you want to do it. And you've got to go and do all the stuff yourself. What is the supposed purpose that's been spun out to make it sound really good? To create a single source of trusted and accessible business data. I'm sure we're all very moved in our hearts by this, in order to prevent the use of false or fraudulent directors' identities, make it easier for external administrators and regulators to trace directors' relationships with companies over time, and eliminate and identify director involvement in unlawful activities such as financing activity. So explain in simple terms what they're actually saying here. Yeah, someone, as Jackie says, they have all these details already. So it's kind of, yeah, it's like, I think that I basically trust, I trust the government. They truly want to use this to prevent and look after us from false or fraud, as much as I trusted the TGA and the APRA to look after my health and the pharmaceutical companies. So that's my comment on that one. So the other one too is that making it easier. So external administrators, now these last two things, I do actually think they're telling the truth on those ones, because an external administrator is like when government administrators take over a corporation because it's in financial trouble. And I think you're going to get a lot more of that. I think they know from the COVID lockdowns that we're going to see a fuckload more of companies go broke, so to speak. So there's going to be more and more businesses go completely broke. And those mortgage rates keep going up and people can't pay their mortgages. So this makes it much easier to hunt people down and kind of bankrupt or take money off people who do whatever they want to do. Pretty similar to what happened in the Great Depression, when as things melted down, they just took control of everyone's assets bit by bit. So they want to make the process a bit easier to basically steal people's money. That's my personal little non-conspiratorial comment. And identify and eliminate director involvement. So it's very similar, just a quick aside, like APRA, by centralizing with APRA. And APRA was actually quite a genius. I remember saying to someone, it was so fucking clever what happened with APRA. If you go back with what happened with them. So with APRA, what actually happened was the government, and I'll be telling you more about this, was they get up in 2010 and like, hey, we're setting up a centralized body, so all naturopaths, chiropractors, all of you guys are going to be able to, join in and have a centralized system. We're going to be able to give you lots of nice benefits and payments, and everyone goes, yay, that sounds amazing, and thank you so much. And then in 2021, some dude or dudess from APRA jumps up and goes, okay, anyone who's registered with APRA has to vaccinate and has to wear masks and has to make sure that anyone that comes to you has to do the same thing. And then people are like, what? But you could see when you centralize something, you can control the whole blooming thing. It's actually really, really easy to control the whole thing. So that's the beauty of how this was done. It was very, very clever. So basically most people were basically caught up in the APRA kind of thing, and basically just like that, they had many of the allied health systems caught in the whole thing. I mean, even naturopaths, although they weren't caught in it, they kind of were seeing everyone else around them, and the peer pressure basically scared the crap out of everyone, and they kind of were finding it hard not to comply and things like that. And it's a little bit like the old joke, which is, why did the koala fall out of the tree? Because he was dead. Why did the second one fall out? It was stapled to the other one's back. And why did the third one fall out? Peer group pressure. And yeah, it's a terrible joke, I know, but I just started thinking of that one. So basically, the third one is identify and eliminate director involvement in unlawful activity. So what phoenixing activities mean is that you get a company and you rack up as much tax debt as you possibly can, and then you shut the company down and start again the next day on a whole new one. Very, very common until 2017, when they tightened up the law to stop people doing stuff like that. And so it's also going to enable them just to regulate more tightly in the commercial sense and kind of make sure they get their money. And it really comes back to the fact that in the sovereign individual, they predicted governments are running out of money. And they said that as governments ran out of money more and more, they start to crack down on their citizens, they start blatantly stealing money, and they turn to blatant criminals. So the book was written in 1995, The Sovereign Individual by Rees, Moggs and Davidson. So they said that pretty much that governments would just blatantly start taking money because they can't keep taxing their citizens, and more of the wealthy would pull out. And that's what's been happening. The super wealthy know what to do. They spend a lot of money with people like me and others, structure themselves to get around the system and walk away from it. So then the government have to get their money from somewhere else. So they get it from either printing money to cause hyperinflation or just stealing it from their citizens. So this is all part of kind of things like that, and being able to do that, so to speak. So Derek, my good friend Derek, who basically speaks with the Global Wealth Club pretty regularly himself, says they also want to know about your personal bank account details in this registration. Yes, they do. That is correct. And would not be surprised if I have another one of their little scamdemics that they start saying things like about your health status and things like that. So yeah, it's pretty full on. What is the purpose? Supposedly to protect the privacy of directors by allowing them to be on the public record without disclosing information that's currently accessible. And again, I'm sure they mean everything they're saying here. It's very important with the risk of cybersecurity and things like that. And so things like that. So it's all about centralizing the system of control. How long does it last? Once in, you're always in. It's a little bit like, you meet someone, you start dating them and you commit to a relationship, and then you find out you can never leave the relationship for the rest of your life. It's a little bit like that. Even if you stop being it, you cannot get yourself off the system. So if you become a director of a subsequent company, you will use the same ID again. And your director ID is attached to you to an individual, not the company. So again, this is when you need to do it by, and just thought I'd summarize once again how it actually works. So how do you actually apply for a director's ID? Through the ABRS website or using the MyGov ID app is how most people, which is different to the MyGov app. So what they tell you to do is to go ahead and, set up the whole, thing or whatever else. And so if you successfully verify identity in the ABRS website, set up the MyID GovID app on your device and gather the relevant supporting documentation, which is given here. So yeah, someone's mentioned what their accountant said to them and things like that. So they're saying that even if you close your business, you've had a company in the past. Well, yeah, look, I mean, accountants will tell you all kinds of stuff and things like that. So in theory, yes. In practice, it's all very different. One of the things I learned from being a lawyer is what happens in theory and what happens in the real world is very different. And I'll show you shortly how things work. If you don't wish to download the MyGov ID app, you can also apply by phone or paper form, noting you'll need to provide ID details when applying. So how does privacy actually work? It's listed out here, so to speak, and things like that. So yeah, so Nicholas says about they came out, if you resign before 1st of September, you don't need to apply. Look, keep in mind, everyone, it's like the COVID mandates. Most of what happened was by scare tactic. I remember even the other day, I was sitting there talking with one of my chiropractors, and he said to me his biggest regret was getting it. And I said to him, I'm just curious. I said, because remember I said to you, I said, there's no way in practice they're going to enforce most of what they're saying, but have the resources just to scare you. And he said, yeah, you did say that. And he said, oh, I think I just got in my head. I thought, well, what if I'm that one person? So fear and scare tactics and hostage fear is very powerful. I mean, 99% of fears never manifest in the real world. So, I mean, people are terrified with COVID, like they're going to do this and going to do that to you. And then it ended. And there's so many people I meet now who are in deep regret and bitterness because they went and got vaccinated because they thought they can't do this, the mandates will go on forever. Now, I will tell you now that I remember at the time, and some of you would remember me saying this last year, who came to my classes last year, I said, in history, what I found, I've never found a vaccine mandate that went longer than 6 months. So I said, I'd be very unlikely to go longer than 6 months. I said, if it does, who knows, it could happen, but it's unlikely. And it lasted in WA around, I think, 6 months or so is what it lasted for. And in most states, it was very similar. It was around 6 months where it was actually like, you must do it now. And the rest of the time was more just companies and airports coercing people into it. So same deal in practice, we've got enough people who are going to comply happily and go along and do it out of fear. But, people resign, basically within a certain time. And you'll see why when you read the legislation, it doesn't really, matter, so to speak, and things like that. So you'll see the way legislation works. I would be very surprised if they start chasing people to fine them for the past. And of course, what Nicholas said confirms what my understanding is just from reading the laws and how they're actually written. This is why I said the pen is mightier than the sword. Whenever mandates are coming out in COVID, the first thing I do, I wouldn't listen to anything that I was reading on the internet. I'd just get the mandates myself and I'd read them word by word. And usually I'd find that most of what was being said was incorrect. I remember when the first Daniel Andrews mask rules came out, I found 3 loopholes within about 5 minutes. And I told my Melbourne friends, no one has to wear a mask under these rules. And all of them would said, oh, no, well, I think we have to. And I'm like, no, I'm a former lawyer. I'm telling you that. So I'm telling you all this because it's very similar how this all works with this. They got all this really big, beautiful words that are designed to scare you and shit like that. But by and large, the basic principles are very similar, as you'll see. So that's the privacy rules. In terms of the penalties that they want to scare you is that there's a civil penalty up to 1 million, and that's mainly for corporations, for certain types of bigger corporations, mind you. In practice, when you read the legislation, what it's actually saying, it's for individuals, it's really more up to 13,200. And keep in mind that the words up to is the key. it's like going for a criminal offence. I mean, there's a maximum sentence, but in practice, they'll probably have different levels of fines, is what will most likely happen in the real world. So that's the first thing to realise. And the civil penalty is a special kind of penalty under corporations law. It kind of means it's not really like a criminal record where you're said like you've beaten someone up or shit like that. It's a commercial or corporate penalty. In fact, I find it incredible because civil is another word for contract law. So it's a contract law penalty. So that it's actually blatantly tell you it's a contract law penalty and things like that. So yeah, so Edward reminds about questions about putting them in the Q&A. So there's been so many comments in the chat. Any questions that were ever asked in the chat have long been lost. So if you do have a question that you're going to want answered at some stage, put it in the Q&A. So civil penalties up to that and things like that. In terms of legislative provisions, there's a series of provisions that are written out here. Section 172 says you can apply for a director's ID and an eligible officer. The registrar may direct an eligible officer to apply. And that's a pretty critical words. So when you look at section 172A, for example, and you go into here, and what it actually says in section 172A, you can see it for yourself. The registrar may direct an eligible officer to apply to the registrar for a director, registration number. And then a person who's not an eligible officer may apply. So you can see this is written here very clearly. So the registrar can give a 28-day or longer notice and even give an extension of time. So when you go to section 1272D, you can see this here. So generally women touch on the period. So the application period is 28 days as a rule. So generally what that means is that the way I'm reading this legislation is that what will likely happen is this. Anyone who doesn't have a director's ID after that date, they may do it automated or they may just start slowly giving out 28-day notices. And that's why they said 1st of December. So they'll probably just start issuing notices and letters, and maybe they will, maybe they won't, which will give you 28 days to apply. And then if you don't do it within the 28 days, you are now guilty of a contract law offence because by becoming a director of a company, at some stage, you've entered into a contract. That's the first thing to realise. So the fact that you've gone and become a director, you have actually entered into a contract with ASIC because you've agreed to take their benefits. That's basic contract law. So the question you do, like I remember years ago, I was an activist with legal stuff. I was still a licensed lawyer. I got targeted by the legal practice board heavily. I fought them for 3 years. I fought police. I won many cases, but got exhausted. And then one day it hit me. My biggest issue is I have a contract with the legal practice board. And right now, by me being an activist going against him, I'm going against my contract. So I resigned and I walked away. And I quit being a lawyer and I walked away from it. And as soon as I did that, I got straight on back with my activism work. Whereas right now, if I was a licensed lawyer teaching all this stuff, I'm sure I'd be running into some problems with them. So I chose to walk away from my contract. If I'd chosen to keep my contract, and believe you me, it was scary because I was making a very large income from my legal practice, a huge income. And I chose to walk away. And that was scary. And for the first little bit, it was like, wow, I still had income coming in, but nothing like what I previously had. But it got me busy and I reconstructed this global wealth and other kind of stuff, and I never looked back by and large. So yeah, Dimmy says I would not be able to do this stuff if I was still registered, and you're 100% right, I would not. I mean, I was doing similar stuff back 10, 12 years ago, Dimmy, winning cases, and I had legal practice board after me for just about anything and everything, and no matter how silly it was. So yeah, I'm sharing that because it's very important understanding this contract ID and how this works. So it's a strict criminal liability offence, being a civil penalty with a fine. It's invoked by infringement notices. So what that means is that, like getting a speeding fine, you'll get an infringement notice under section 172F, and you can't have multiple, and whatever you do, don't go and get a false ID number, because then you're deliberately committing a contractual breach. So you're better off to either pull out the system or stay in it and comply. It's that simple, and things like that. So very important that you actually do that. So, and things like that. And in terms of Christina saying there was no contract at the time I became a director, it's changing the contract. Yeah, and look, it's like Telstra. Telstra can change their contract, and they've got clauses saying they can. So Telstra could suddenly come out with some ridiculous rule, and then you can choose to move to Optus, and it's a similar kind of deal. So keep in mind that, yeah, it's a contract, but they're in charge of the contract and they've got superior power. So let's look at 5 ways you can handle it from here. One, of course, is contest and resist it. Now, I know people are doing that. You're serving notices on them. Look, you can do that. It's a bit like if I don't like what Telstra are doing with my, broadband contract, I can contest it. I don't know how it would go, but it's one option that you've got. Personally, I wouldn't waste my time if Telstra did that. I would just leave them. But get someone else to do it. In other words, you may have a business partner or people with you who actually are perfectly happy to do director's ID. And I'm actually in that situation. I'm very fortunate. I've got business partners involved with me in my different companies that are happy to take on the ID and happy to get in the system because they see that as their path to fight back. So I've been able to keep myself out of it and get rid of my directorships a long time ago. So I started getting rid of them a while ago for this kind of reason. So that is a second option. You get someone else to do it, who's happy to do it with you. The third option is you use an offshore or foreign company. And the only problem with that one is that with an offshore company, so to speak, is that they are brought into the legislation, but only if the company registered with ASIC as a foreign business, because then they're in contract. So in theory, you can actually set up an offshore company, run Business Australia without registering with ASIC. Now, I'm saying all that, if ASIC found out about it, they would probably try and force you to do it. But that is another option that is on the table that people can do, not one I'm doing personally, but it's one that people can do, and some people do actually do, and things like that. So use individuals, but with clearly written trust agreements. So one of the things I know when I used to be a lawyer was the use of bare trust and agency agreements and things like that. So for example, if you've got a charitable trust set up or family trust of individual trustees, now lawyers say that's not as good asset protection, which is true, but provided that you set up individual trustees with very, very clear agreements and with very clear legal help, so you wouldn't need to get some expert advice before going this path with a lawyer and with experts in this area. This is another option where, and I have used this a little bit myself. So where I use individuals, but use clearly written agreements which link the individuals to the trust arrangement. So that is another way of doing it. And in this way, you can get around it. And so, of course, that's something you would need some kind of guidance or advice or assistance before doing that. So that's something where you have to be, either find a lawyer you trust, or, if you're or be one of the 1% with Global Wealth Club and, complete a form, and then we can guide you at least on the basics and, link you with lawyers who can help you and stuff like that. So that's the fourth option, and a very viable one. It's actually one I use myself. So I personally, just to be very transparent, I use number 2 and I use number 4. The fifth one is you play the game, but with a clean backup plan. So what I mean by that is there are some things where, for example, I've registered my foundation with the government for ACNC and ATO and done all that. And I know people who go private. And I'm saying the reason that I'm happy to do that is right now, the Australian laws of foundations, some of the best in the world. They comply with the common law. You get all the tax exemptions, you get everything that you want. So I don't need to really go and do anything crazy. Now, if the government turned around and suddenly changed the terms of my contract and went crazy on me, I'd be looking at going a different way. There was a time many years ago when I ran my church foundation in the private realm. And I remember even getting called by the government one time, and I just told them openly, I said, well, the laws of God are higher than the laws of man. So as far as I'm concerned, you got no right to tell me to do this. And they were very bit gobsmacked and didn't quite know what to say, and said, well, you have to obey. And I said, well, I don't have to do anything. But I'm saying because I'm operating under a higher law. And I hung up on them and got on with life. But then I decided to go ahead and do it anyway, and basically register, because I thought, well, I actually may as well do it because it's easier, and I've got my backup plan if it happens. So that's another option. It's okay to play the game if you're like Neo and Morpheus and Matrix. So Morpheus would enter the matrix and then he would come out again. And he knew what he was doing. I have a net worth friend who knows all this stuff. He's got a net worth of $180 million. And he openly tells me, he says, I know it's a game. I know it's an illusion. He says, I play it, but he says, I've got my backup plans always waiting behind the scenes. So that's another thing to understand. So that's your 5 options by which to go with. So in summary, you can either contest and resist it. And if you're up for that and you feel strongly about your cause, you should do it. You know, you get someone else to do it. If you've got a business partner who is happy to do it, you can use an offshore company, but keep in mind, it's not really what I think is the best way to go, but it is an option. You can do this, which is a very valid strategy, but you'll definitely need some help to do this properly and legally. Otherwise, you know, you may well find you're legally vulnerable. And comply and play the game, but with a clear backup plan. And so in terms of how you proceed from here, to finish off before we take the questions, it's basically the order of creation is God, man. So ultimately, this webinar was always about empowering you. That's what it was about. So government, corporation, deep state, and persons. So if you're under civil contract law, you're falling into this category straight away. Now, in saying that, you can be a man or woman and choose to contract yourself. And if you do enter into a contract, you want to comply with your contract. That's my view. I'm a big believer in it. So if I decided to go and get the director's ID myself, if I decided that, I would have strictly complied with it. Because to me, if I do a contract, I choose to do that. And yes, trusts are outside the control of ASIC. I just saw that one come through. But if you enter into a contract, you really should honor it. So my rule is I operate under the common law as much as possible. If I do a contract, I honor it. So really, I suggest everyone either plays the game and complies, pulls out of the system completely and looks at these alternate ways. It's that simple. It's the Uniform Commercial Code is a really good thing to understand, you know, this kind of stuff as well, the Uniform Commercial Code. And that's a really good starting point as well. We'll be doing more teachings on this, because that's how the whole legal system across all the world is constructed. So very simply, my view, as I said, if you opt into the system, abide by the rules. But keep in mind within your mindset and your frequency, I like this scripture here, or this ancient text, and it's talking about coming out of the ancient mystery Babylon the Great, or system that's designed to enslave you. In other words, don't fall down with the system and make sure you've got a backup plan to get out of it. So in summary, these are the things that we've looked at today, and things like that. So hopefully this has given you some insight and guidance to move forward. So what I'm going to do now is start answering the questions, and then we'll finish up by showing you how you can be more involved in the community, promote it, and we can really make a big difference. So let's just go through the questions. Some of them may have already been answered. For new companies, no, it's for existing ones, so that's not correct, Ross. Hang on, Ed, you're basically, how about you come on, Ed, and you take the camera. Ed's my son, and you can ask the questions because we've got a lot here.
Yeah, I enjoyed that presentation, good as usual. And like we were saying, yeah, Joanne and Tony, there'll be a replay sent out. It'll be put on YouTube, and we'll have that up in the next 24 hours or so, just by the end of the day, just because we know how important this topic is. So yeah, there are a lot of questions. So keep in mind, if we can't get to yours, it's just because there's a lot of other questions coming through. So we'll go through as many as we can. Then whichever ones are missed, just feel free to send them to our support email, which we'll try to get back to them. Even, I don't know how open you'd be to it, but how open would you be to even doing some kind of follow-up webinar, purely just going through a Q&A for those that we miss?
Yeah, look, I'm open to that because there's a shitload of questions here. We may run out of time. So, yeah, look, I'm open to it. Let's just start going through and see how we go. We have to be finished really by 10:15 latest. So,
yeah, so we'll get straight into
it. We'll do questions in until 10 past 10. So 8 minutes of questions. So let's just move fast because most of them I can do quick.
Yeah, well, the first question is, how will the fine process work? Like, for example, how many fines can they actually issue to you? Is it just one or multiple? And also, will they send any threats beforehand to give you a notice?
Oh, I don't know, but based on the way I read the legislation, I'm sure that they'll give you a notice for 28 days. They probably will give you a follow-up and stuff like that. So that's my guess. But from the way I read it, you have a 28-day notice, and it's a bit like a speeding fine. Then you're liable, and goes from there. That's how I read it.
Yeah. Do you need to apply if you're a director of a trustee of a self-managed super fund?
If you're a corporate trustee, yes.
Next question, can you ask for an extension to ASIC while investigating a director's option, either to sign up or close the corporation?
So what's that one, sorry?
So can you ask for an extension to ASIC while investigating a director's option, either to sign up or close the corporation?
Yep, so yes, so hang on. I didn't quite understand the question. So where's the question on the chat so I can read it?
So this is from John Island. Can you ask for an extension to ASIC while investigating a director's option?
Oh, you can try. Don't know how you'll go, but you can try.
And next question, I called and asked for an extension. They said it's only for if you have lost your birth certificate in the floods. So do you have any ideas of how to get out of this if they are saying even past directors have to get one?
Well, yeah, I think it's been going for a while. My feeling is that they'll give a bit of grace, and then they'll start hitting 28-day notices at some stage, and they may, look, it's like COVID. They may not do it to everyone. They may just do it for some. They may do it for everyone. So I think it goes back to this. I think that I think my experience are actually quite strict. So my guess is you got to decide pretty quickly, do I want to participate or do I want to get out? That would be my suggestion. And Jackie also answered, are worth looking at changing to a partnership? I really want to answer that one, because the answer is I don't like partnerships because they're the worst structure possible for asset protection. You are liable for every single, thing of your partners and vice versa. You're better off to look at the option 4 I gave, which was individuals linked to a trust in some way using legal documents. So you really probably should get advice on that.
Now, by not creating a direct ID and using remedy to avoid fines or whatever, would it open you up to being audited?
Oh, maybe. I wouldn't have thought so, no. I wouldn't. I mean, look, it's possible, but I'd be surprised. I think they're two separate issues myself.
Yeah. The definition of eligible in the legislation refers to a company in Norfolk Island. So how does this apply to us here in Australia?
Oh, look, it just includes it if you read it correctly. It just includes Norfolk Islands companies and things like that. So it doesn't mean it's the only one, it just means they're included as well, because Norfolk Islands is considered part of Australia. Yeah.
And what if I have a trust and company for private super? Can I get out of the ID if it can be restructured without a company?
Well, my understanding is, yeah, if you can do it, that's what I mentioned of option 4, the individual trustees with legal documents to make it to work that way. But you just got to get rid of the asset company, yes.
Yeah.
That's how I see it. That is how I see it. I mean, how I apply in practice, we won't really know till the 1st of December hits, but, that's when we'll know for sure.
Yeah. Can you please do a notice that is directed to business that owe you money? For example, a builder has not paid an invoice after 40 days, they are in default of their contract. Would be great to add in late penalties, etc.
I don't know what you're asking there, because that's not really to do with the webinar. But yeah, if you go to the common law notices section in the free Global Wealth Club, read that. That can give you a bit of help, Patrick. So that should be able to assist you. One thing I'll quickly throw in there before I forget is that, yeah, if you want to leave the system by 1st of December, there's ASIC forms that you would complete to resign as director, and then you would want to lodge them pretty quickly. So you just get the form, go into ASIC, or else you would just go online, complete it yourself, or go to your accountant and get them to help you complete the form. Yeah.
So if you did resign as a director then, and you're the sole director, what happens to the business?
Well, that's why you would need some advice to move it to a new structure. So you move it into either sole trader, which I don't recommend, or some kind of trust kind of arrangement, or some different way of doing it. So you just move the business to a different structure, or it depends on how the company's set up and how it's done. There's so many other factors of that, because if it's just a pure company and you move it all over, you may have tax implications if you don't do it correctly. So yeah, if you're kind of going to do change structure, you should get some advice.
Yeah. Are there any grandfather clauses if you're an existing director before this new requirement was introduced?
Yeah, the grandfathering clause was basically you had since last year to get this sorted out. So yeah, there was 12 months grandfathering.
And I would like to pull out of the system altogether. However, I have a self-managed super fund and I don't think I can take my money out until I turn 60, which isn't for 8 years. What would be the best course of action at this stage?
Yeah, well, to leave a system that you've grown up in your whole life, it's easier said than done. You know, there's always tentacles of the beast around you. So yeah, I'm kind of in the same. I've pulled out of most of the stuff, but yeah, super, you can't really touch under their rules until you hit 60. So yeah, you just got to wait on that till you turn 60 and just remove anything that you can in the meantime.
Is it a simple process to deregister the company and change the trustees of the trust?
Oh, I wouldn't say it's simple, but it's well, okay, it's simple, but there's quite a few steps to do.
Yeah. As a sole director of a self-managed super fund, is there another structure I can use to avoid DIN?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can always have individual trustees and get a second trustee. So that's one way you can do it with a super fund. You've got to have at least 2 trustees of the self-managed fund. Whereas you're a sole director, so it's your sole fund. So yeah, you just have to get another trustee involved, is my understanding. I mean, super is not something I do a lot to do with, but your accountant can generally help with that.
Yeah. So we'll only be able to answer a few more questions because it's 10:10 now. So you already answered this, but pretty much can my business partner be the one who signs up for an ID, but I can remain without the ID? Will I have to give up my director title?
Yes and yes.
So let's see. What are your thoughts on applying for extension to get facts on race structure and how to put the application together?
Yeah, I'm not sure how you would go on that one. But I mean, you can try. I mean, look, if I was in that situation myself, I'll tell you what I would do. I don't go by fear or reactive. To me, I've got a 28-day notice, and the government, you know, as they showed in the whole pandemic, you know, they wouldn't even know how to, you know, I mean, sorry if it's inappropriate for people, I always can't resist it. They wouldn't even know how to manage a basic brothel, let alone run a whole country. So it's perfectly possible that the government could, you know, that could take a fair while to get their head around to doing much. So I think that you probably got more time than you think, but don't quote me on it. You know, it's not guaranteed. But the way I read legislation, at a minimum, you know, if you've got 28 days, you know, basically, if they hit you with notice, you've got 28 days to get it sorted out or resign. So.
Well, I don't think you should be apologizing for your language. Everyone should be used to your language by now and your obsession with brothels and all that. But
yeah, I find it interesting. Like someone, yeah, I know. Like someone's written, if you're still directed by 30th of November, you need the ID. Yeah, well, supposedly you have to get vaccinated and all kinds of stuff. So look, maybe that's true, maybe that's not. That's what they say to you. In practice, are they going to chase every single person up, even the ones who resign on the 1st of December? I'm not saying they won't, but I'd be very surprised. That's my comment on that. I think the main thing is start the process now of getting out if you want to get out.
Yeah, so you've got the support. Everyone loves your language. So the last question that I'll ask is, any chance you'd consider doing a live group course helping us navigate this situation to take our power back? I'm happy to pay for that. Yeah,
I'm actually happy to do something like that because there's so many questions I haven't answered here, and that's a bit of a bummer. So what I think would be good is that, do these questions remain in the Zoom thing afterwards, Ed?
Not that I'm aware.
Yeah, because normally you can get a Zoom report or something and then you can see the questions, because ideally, if we could do that, we can do a webinar and go through them. But yeah, my feeling is we do a follow-up webinar. I mean, who would like a follow-up webinar where all we do is Q&As based on the ones that weren't answered? I mean, who would like that? Because if we do one, I'll do one as soon as possible, the next day or two. We'll just work out and give you some urgent notice. So yeah, look, okay, I'll do a Q&A follow-up, and that's all that will be. So we'll do one either tomorrow or Friday. I'll let you know, but one way or the other we'll do that. So yeah, done. Looks like everyone wants it, Ed, so that's what we've got to do. So for now, I'll finish up, and what I will do is just finish by saying the next steps obviously come to the Q&A. The wealth matrix we've got here, which is basically, yeah, so look, the idea is to move yourself out of the slave matrix is what I tell people, so to speak. So yeah, look, in terms of our free community, look, if you joined us, as I mentioned, we've got the 99% 1% vision, where basically what happens is that we've got lots and lots and lots and lots of free education. So if you're one of the 99% or your friends are, just get the word out, please. Let people know about it. Let them know about our site, our YouTube channel. The key is if you become a free member, you'll be able to access lots of good free education. And rest assured, we're not going to take advantage of that and then spam you with all kinds of shit and try and sell you stuff. It's really not what we're about. I'm more interested in building something that's going to empower Australians and help people as much as possible. We know there's always going to be plenty of people who, if you really do want some help and you think, look, I'd like to get some advice, and you're one of that 1% who do want to get some advice, yeah, you know, you just have to go ahead and complete a form. And do you know what a form is on this site? If people, oh no, yeah, here it is, inquire. So just over here on the far right is inquire. So if you're one of that 1% who think, yeah, I wouldn't mind actually talking more about guidance or, you know, help, a bit more specialized help. Otherwise, yeah, come along to the Q&A, which we're doing on next couple of days, and we'll send an email out and let you all know. And yeah, join our free site, get our free trainings, let people know about it. And yeah, look, thanks so much, everyone. You've been a really great group, and look forward to teaching people more and answering questions and answers. And yeah, we'll next webinar, we'll be able to sit there and pretty much you can smash these questions to your heart content. So apologies if we didn't get to answer them. I did not expect to get so many questions. So yeah, look, I'd rather allow a good 45 minutes to an hour for follow-up to answer every single question that you've got. And then we'll be able to put that out there. So please keep these questions that you've given, turn up and ask them again, and I'll make sure that they're answered. So thank you everyone for attending. Look forward to, you know, seeing you here, and look forward to basically working with some of you and seeing you on the follow-up Q&A. Let your friends know about the Q&A, and hopefully Travis will be a good boy and get the recording done in record time. So thanks everyone, and bye for now.